Welcome to this week's episode with me, Daisy Adams. Here at the Cricket Coaching Code podcast, we've recently teamed up with Cricket.jobs, a team who are not only highly motivated to find you the ideal job within cricket, but they will also ensure the right people apply for your environment. We've partnered up with them because I've always wondered what is out there in the worldwide market, and I couldn't find a one-stop shop that brings them all together. Now I have. Head over to cricket.jobs to see the latest opportunities. So let's get into this week's episode. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Cricket Coaching Code podcast. This week we are really fortunate to be joined by Dr. Graham Winter, somebody who I came across about 3 years ago whilst looking at sports psychology and cricket, and sort of connected with him through the really good book of Mindful Cricket, and lots in there chimed with me as a coach and as a player. So Dr. Graham, good afternoon, good evening where you are in Adelaide. Welcome onto the show.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to having a good conversation. Yeah,
that'll be great. And I've got a whole load of questions lined up, but I'm sure we will move in different areas and react to what we discuss, which will be great. So if you don't mind me asking then, can I go ahead with the first question, and can you give our listeners a little bit of a background into your connection with cricket, your involvement, and sort of where you have had touch points with it throughout your career, noting some of the other stuff that you are currently involved in?
Yeah, cricket's been very pivotal to my life. I like most people who are listening to this, I guess I played a lot of cricket as a kid. And played first-class cricket for South Australia, played in Sheffield Shield winning teams and One Day Cup winning teams, but didn't play an awful lot because I was really passionate about pursuing my career in psychology, and in order to do that, the two didn't necessarily connect all that well. But then I trained in organisational psychology, and the Institute of Sport were looking for a psychologist, and the then director of the Institute of Sport here in Australia was keen to try and appoint somebody, because there weren't any courses in sports psychology in those days. So it was a question of, well, what sort of psychologist do we go and get? And he was quite adamant that he wanted somebody who'd played sport at an elite level. So there was almost probably a short list of one. There weren't too many psychs that were playing sport at sort of first-class cricket level or whatever. So for me, it was a really interesting opportunity. I spent about 6-7 years full-time at was the South Australian Institute of Sport, but also working with the Australian Cricket Academy with Rod Marsh and the group there. And that was the era when sort of Ponting and Gilchrist and a whole variety of those sort of players, Jefferson Langer and so on, came through. I then continued on, I guess, doing a bit of balancing between performance and sport work. So I was appointed Chief Psychologist for the Australian Olympic team for 3 Olympics, including Sydney. Did some work with the Australian Test cricket team. But one of my passions has always been the corporate area. I really enjoy doing organisational psychology work, and I guess the latter, we might talk about it a bit. Some of the work with the Olympic team was very much about working. The Australian Olympic team in Sydney, for example, was 970 people. So you're talking a significant size organisation. But I spent some time with PricewaterhouseCoopers in their strategic change group, and really for the last sort of 15 years or so, I've pretty much worked full-time in the corporate area, but I have a passion in cricket, hence the Mindful Cricket book and the workbook that went with it, and some of the stuff that I do there as well. So cricket's always been an absolute personal passion, but if I look back, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to pursue those sort of balancing acts of sport and business if it hadn't been for the cricket experience. So I'm very grateful to the sport for the opportunity it provided.
Yeah, great. Tying both of those passions in together must be sort of really quite rewarding to do that. I'm going to ask you a very simple question then. Why psychology? Why sports psychology? Can you remember what the initiator was to go? And you mentioned about the two sort of conflicting as you were playing. Can you remember the why? What got you into that sort of area?
The why to psychology was pretty simple. I just didn't like studying at school. And probably not that much at university either. I think my wife, who beat me in every exam at university and says you majored in cricket and surfing. Um, but my parents sent me to do some vocational guidance testing when I was in my second last year at school, and the person who was doing the testing said, "Well, you should do law. Yeah, you've got a good verbal intelligence, and yeah, you should be able to do law." And I just walked out going, "I'm going to do what he's doing." I just was absolutely fascinated by that, and then. So I remember in our last year at school, people were saying, well, we had to write down what will you be doing in 25 years' time. And I said I'll be working with organisations as a psychologist, helping people to perform at the best they can. And to me, it's sport and cricket is just, in some respects, just another domain where you're trying to operate in that sort of high demand environment. So I think the sport was the personal passion, but I mean, I've been a registered psych now for over 40 years, and I still love it, still passionate about it. Just spent an hour and a half doing some coaching work. I mean, I'm here in Australia, but yeah, you're in the UK, but I just spent the last hour and a half doing some coaching work with a very senior executive in the UK. And yeah, very stimulating, still love doing that. So yeah, if you find what you're passionate about, you're pretty lucky, and I am very lucky.
Amazing. Yeah, you can absolutely see the passion and enjoyment that you get from it when you sort of reflect and think back onto that. What then? And you mentioned about organisational psychology. Can you share with us the differences or the sort of the contrasts between organisational psychology and sports psychology? Are there any similarities that you have been able to transfer over between the two? Can you share those sort of your initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. But there's not that many sports psychologists who are trained in the organisational psych area. Um, I guess if you're trained in organisational psychology, there's probably three or four almost fundamental assumptions. One is your role as the psychologist is to support the leaders, because it's the leaders who create the culture. I see it exactly the same in sport. My role is to support the coach. The coach is the person who's creating the environment in which success happens. I think secondly, culture is just critical. You take two players and put them in completely different contexts, teams, coaching environments, whatever, and Stacey, yeah, and you end up with a completely different person. So I've always been of the belief that in order to be effective in the sports psychology area, yes, you need to be able to work with the individual athlete, and many sports psychs, I think, take more of almost a clinical sort of approach, working very closely with the individual athlete. I would do some of that, but I guess my interest has always been how do you create the environment around the athlete? How do you build those capabilities? But that's just sort of in some respects, the mindset that I would take to it. Because at the end of the day, I think it's the thing you learn when you're playing, having sort of had that experience of playing first-class cricket. When you're out there, you're it. You've got to make the decisions. And I think, and it's something I always try and impress on sort of younger sports psychologists is, and I'm probably being a bit sarcastic, but your job's not to help the athlete to become more neurotic. Your job is actually to help the athlete to be out in the middle and make good choices and good decisions and have an enjoyable experience doing it. And you're endeavouring to provide that. And it's not, to me, it's no different to the coach. The coach wants to sit back and be the proud parent, if you like, that watches and go, wow, look at that. How cool is that? And I think that's the psychologist's role as well. And I think it's an advantage being an org psych, but I have some pretty good debates with some of my compatriots who have some different approaches to sports psychology. Mine's probably a little more pragmatic, would be a reasonable way of putting it.
So tying that back then, when I've underlined the word here, culture, and you talk about the individual, the individuals, their interaction with other individuals, their interaction with the environment, with the system that they operate in, with the other people. How, in your sort of reflection and understanding of cricket, how different was that when you were involved in the Olympic the Australian Olympic team. You talk about the magnitude of people that you're dealing with, the sports, the variety of sports that must be, that are, and the disciplines that are within those sports, the ability to execute your best performance, train for 4 years, execute one day, one event, one time. It's not like it's the first ball of the over, you might play a miss, you get a second go at, and you get a third, and as a bowler you've got to bowl 6 balls. You can't just say that's it for me, thanks, I've been hit for 12 off my first 2. How different, and what did you think you learned during that time that potentially sort of developed you in the org and the cricket space?
I learned pretty quickly once I got involved with the Olympic area that we were absolute amateurs when it came to
really
mental preparation and
And what sort of time scale was it? When was it your initial touch point with them then? Were you
80s?
Was it?
So
okay.
Long time ago now. But having said that, I think a lot of cricket is still. I mean, I think I'm sure we're going to get into this. I think cricket's still got some pretty fundamental problems with the way training and practice and so on is organised for a whole host of reasons. But I mean, just as an example, when I first started doing work with the Cricket Academy, I remember Rod Marsh saying to me, "So what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Come in and tell these kids how to play cricket or something?" And it was actually quite funny because I said, "No, I've got a really good activity plan first up, and I think from that I'll build credibility, and from then on I think we'll be fine." And he said, "Better be a pretty good first activity." And it was. I'd got Rod out in a Shield match in Western Australia for a duck. So what I had A3 sheets printed of the Wisden book showing me getting him out for a duck. But that was the only thing we did on cricket for the first sort of 6 to 9 months. I spent all of my time getting the cricketers to look at how tennis players, golfers, and various Olympic athletes went about preparing themselves to be consistently good performers. Because you don't, when you're an Olympic athlete, you don't sort of go, I just need to perform for 10 seconds or on one day. No. You need to be so reliable in your performances that you know that you can deliver when that moment comes. And you also need to be able to take out of your mind that it's this moment. And it's all about attention. So, and I found that by introducing a lot of those cricketers to, this is how your top tennis players prepare. This is how your top golfers prepare. This is how I still quite a lot of work with the Australian cycling team and our shooters who won some world titles. And this is how shooters, how the shooters shoot a 60-shot round. And we had a group that won a world championship, broke a world record. And I said they don't shoot 60 shots and hold their concentration. What we used to do with the shooters, we walk along and kick them, bump them, swear at them. I used to make them wear tapes which had us telling them they couldn't shoot, they were useless, etc. Because the one thing they had to be able to do was to reset their concentration and go again. Mm-hmm. And that is the essence of cricket. Cricket is played one contest at a time. That's it. And tennis is played one at a time. Golf's played one at a time. And the beauty of those sports is very much like cricket. There is space in between.
Yep.
And when you got space in between, you got time to get in your own head. And that's, I think, part of the problem. But we don't train well for that. And still, I mean, a lot of good coaches do. But there's an awful lot. And a lot of the coaching bodies attached to a lot of the cricket associations are still training like the 1980s.
Yeah, we will definitely, you see it all the time, the sort of, we've always done it like this. You people who have grown up exposed and then continue delivering and that, and there really hasn't been all the way through the levels, the paradigm shift that I think potentially is required. But I'm going to come back to, as I showed the book and the workbook earlier. Why did you? What was the driver to say, do you know what? I am going to put pen to paper. I'm going to think about this problem statement, and I'm going to come up with a bit of a model, and we can talk through the model to allow coaches and players to look at it, put their context and their perspective against it, and try and enact something that will hopefully produce a better person and a better performer.
I think if there was one moment, it was probably Ashley Ross was at that stage, who's an Australian and has done international work with New Zealand, and was he was the chief coach at the Cricket Academy, the International Cricket Academy in Dubai. And I knew him quite well from stuff when I was involved, because I had a contract with Cricket Australia for sort of, I don't know, 7-8 years, something like that. And he was involved as a coach through that period. And then when he was involved here in South Australia, we just actually used to go to the same gym together. And then he went to Dubai, and he just called me up one day and he said, look, I want to do something in sports psychology, but I just want to do something a bit different to, getting somebody in and talking about goal setting and visualization. We want to run a whole lot of stuff on simulations. We want to show coaches how to create some different environments. And I think it was probably that, which was probably around about 2016, 17, something in that sort of area, I would think. And that really sparked me, because it gave me the chance to say, okay, let's apply a bit of creativity, because it's no different to working with a corporate group where you're saying, I want to shift the habits of leaders, or shift the habits of teams. I mean, quite a few of my corporate clients operate in defence areas, for example, and they're trying to handle incredibly complex software and engineering issues, putting combat systems into ships, or operating around sort of cyber issues and so on. And in those environments, they've got to develop a different range of skills, the way they solve problems and so on. And to me, it's the same with cricket. You're trying to develop people's ability to solve problems and pursue opportunities. So that was the sort of trigger for it. And then I just thought, look, I might just block out a period of time, and I'm going to put together some stuff. I'll test it out. So obviously I know a reasonable number of sort of people from cricket coaches and stuff like that, and bounce stuff off them as I went along. And unfortunately, I guess the other thing was COVID hit pretty much at about the same time as the book came out. Now, I was doing quite a bit of work with the Root Academy when they bring their people over here, and we did a lot of the sort of testing and stuff with them. And that was, I guess, good for me, just reinforcing nice idea, Graham, but it won't work, versus, no, actually it does work. Works quite effectively. And I just saw the response of the coaches in Dubai. I saw the response of the Root Academy people, and went, there's a genuine need and opportunity here to reinvent the way cricket stuff's done. But then, as you've said, and we'll probably talk about it, along came COVID, and a few things got interrupted. We'll talk about where that goes, I'm sure.
So you mentioned there, you saw its effectiveness. What to you was your ability to measure that effectiveness? And I know, obviously, you mentioned there sort of the coaches' reactions and the players' reactions, but were there other things that the coaches were able to see themselves, the benefits and the understanding behind the model, how to implement the model, the approaches, and aligned to the workbook? How else was sort of effectiveness of your mindful cricket approach taken?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're doing is if I get quite specific, to me, you look at the performance environment and you go, okay, so what is it that a batsman and a bowler actually do out on a cricket ground? What's the cadence? So what's the speed at which things operate? You mentioned your own scale, like, first ball, you're out, walk off, etc. So for me, what I want to do is at least one training session every week, I want to replicate that environment as much as I possibly can. I want players to operate in the same cadence. I want them to have the same consequences. So what we do is we set up and we train the players to run. So we use it's probably going to get, excuse me, a bit more technical, but we use some of the methodologies that have come out of the corporate area around agile project management, which in other words is small teams working together and using a simple loop of plan, do, check, and adapt. So what you're doing is setting up squads around a net, 6 to 7, 8 players. You train them in one or two very basic habits that you want them to use. So it might be just, how do I set for a particular delivery? How do I reset? How do I refocus my concentration? How do I start? What do I do after a positive experience? How do I perform if I'm really stressed, etc. And then we're running simulations of the players doing that in the nets. So what it might mean is, over, say, 20 minutes, a batsman might only face 15 deliveries. But they're not going to face any more than 15 deliveries out in the middle of the ground in that amount of time. And there's going to be consequences for that. And the bowlers are bowling a certain number of deliveries. So we have players there with little mini whiteboards. So one person's recording accuracy. You're then bringing the batsmen and the bowlers together. And one of the most fascinating things is when you just get two bowlers to bowl 6 balls each to a batsman, and then get the batter and the bowler together and say, what did you do? Get the batsman to ask the bowlers, what did I do that made it most difficult for you? And then get it to do it the other way around. Batter, what did you feel the most pressure? And what you'll find is the bowlers think that the 2 balls they bowled that beat the bat are the ones that caused the batsman the most pressure. The batsman would go, no, it was the 3 you landed on off stump that I didn't actually quite sure that I should go. That was what was pressure, and that's why I did this. So behind all that, you're saying to the players, there's only 2 things you need to do. One is you need to own the way you set up. You need to own your own rhythm, your own space. So if you're a batter, you control the tempo. If you're the bowler, you control the tempo. So you need to own your space, and you need to hold your shape. So as a bowler, it's your rhythm. As a batter, it's your game. It's how you play it. So every piece of training is then, how do I own my space? How do I hold my shape? And that isn't actually any different to me preparing a chief executive to go and make a presentation to their staff. Own your space, hold your shape, except that's more about how they control, how they present themselves, the emotion and so on. But it's helping the person to have something really practical that they can do. Mm-hmm. Then if you then say, okay, there's a bunch of other tools like visualization and goal setting and so on. Yeah, there are, but let's learn them by practicing the way we're going to do it. So, and some batters find it very irritating. They walk in, they get out, they come out. But why not? Because the most important thing you need to do as a batsman is start your innings. But they don't start practicing. They'll just play a few shots. Now I'm okay. That's BS. Yeah. That is not the demand environment. Watch how divers train for Olympics. Watch how shooters train. Watch how archers train. They don't get out there and just shoot a few random shots or whatever. The coach will go, in 5 minutes, you're going to the top of the diving tower. 5 people are going to watch. We're going to video it. This is for keeps. We're all going to rate you out of 10. Prepare yourself and go and do it. It's easy when they go to competition. They go, oh, this is cool.
Been here before.
I've been there before.
Yeah.
So I think it's this ability to say, how do I create that environment? And if cricket starts thinking more about how the batter and the bowler partner with each other in practice environments, there's so much more we can do. And then what you get is the players come back going, it was so much more enjoyable. I remember Greg Chappell coming out one stage, and we'd set up one of these scenarios for one of the school systems here. And he watched for about 20 minutes. He said, I think it's the first time I've ever seen people actually practicing cricket. They're actually practicing what happens out on the ground. And he'd walk over the bowler and say, what are you trying to do? So I'm trying to do this. How's it working? Pretty good. The batsman's just told me this is what's happening. What are you going to do next? Fantastic. That's the psychology of cricket. It's not sitting reading a book.
If you look at, if I think back and look at how cricket is practiced, given the constraints sometimes, and I look at the UK, and those constraints exist for various reasons, and actually our off season is longer than our, in our in season. But the benefit, and I think, would you think it's fair to say that the benefit of approach and practicing the process, because that's the thing that won't change when you change your environment or the game condition or the format or the situation or the game or the scoreboard, being able to have the confidence and assurance that you've practiced and executed and understood your process, transferring that into the game is, that's the sort of key fundamental to what I think doesn't exist in cricket practice at the moment in many areas.
And it takes preparation. But once, and I mean, when we started with the Root Academy guys, Sean Seagert, who was running it, he was fantastic. But as he said, my assistant coaches are struggling with this initially. And they are, because they're role changes. Because you want the players to be responsible for what's going on in that net. You want them to control that. Then you've got fielding exercises. So as a coach, you're designing for pods of 6 to 8 players. You want them engaged and involved all of the time. Whereas again, you sit and look at a cricket practice, as you know, there's 2 or 3 people standing over there, you got 3 people strolling in, bowling over here. It doesn't have to be like that. Or even if you've got the numbers, you can still go, right, for the next 5 minutes, we're going to run a match simulation. It is. And it's so simple. It's 12 to win off the next sort of 4 deliveries. Offside packed, bowlers, where are you going to bowl? Batters, what's your strategy? Okay, let's give it a go. Let's see what happens. And then you debrief it. What worked, what didn't work. And as you said, you're not trying to, it's not so much the shots they play, but it's, did I own my space? Did I hold my shape? Because then when they get out in the game, they're more likely to practice that. So to me, it's that, cricket is probably there are not too many sports where the practice environment is more different than the competition environment. And the harsh reality is we're not yet at a situation where, and we're probably not going to get to a situation where you can create, I don't know, like I'd always thought if you could somehow sort of create circles on ovals with pitches in between, so round nets with 8 people, and you create this sort of, but who can do that? You need $1 million, we need a few $1 million and so on. So it's just not going to happen. But I think a little bit of creativity and just a little bit of recognition that what you want people to do is to be thinking what they're doing. And I think that's okay. Now, I won't overdwell on it because I think there's so many other things we could talk about, but I think that whole sense of just make sure you're practicing cricket, not just practicing hitting balls or bowling balls is a really good one to consider.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much. So looking at let's dive into some of the sort of talk about a little bit of the model in mindful cricket approach, and you talk about a game mindset model. Now, immediately, if we think back to that last bit of conversation, the first word there is game. It's not practice. We are trying to establish what our purpose is, and that is to execute and perform in a game, because as soon as we say game, we realize that there is a winner, a loser, consequence, success. So the word game straight away has some some things that we think about. Then we talk about mindset. So we're then focusing on, actually it's not the technical movement of the foot, of the head, of all the other parts. We're really focusing on what's the main thing that allows us to be a human, be a person, be a performer, be a cricketer, be a friend, be a captain, whatever it might be. It's absolutely the mind. And then obviously the word there, model. So you've put together sort of 4 areas, and please correct me if any of this is either incorrectly understood, but your model is underpinned by having a clear mind, and that to me is really the sort of the first thing that comes out. Then you talk about playing brave, playing clever, and playing better. Let's pick up on that clear mind bit, and I think you talk about owning your space, keeping your shape. Is that sort of tied in, linked in with that clear mind, or does having that clear mind come first, or where's that relationship with the first bit that you mentioned there?
That's a really good question.
And I suppose for me, and this is just an engineer by trade, it's quite the. Are they interlinked? How are they interlinked?
Yeah,
how are
they're
they
interlinked.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no question. If you get a bunch of performance sports psychologists together, and yeah, in fact, there was a group that did this exercise, and it's like, what is the single most important mental skill? The answer is focus or attention. Yeah, because if you can't put your attention onto the ball, for example, or if you can't put your attention onto your rhythm and your action, you can't do it. So the question then is, well, okay, what helps you to pay attention? A clear mind. But without getting too technical, but we're probably talking to a lot of coaches, given the the nature of the group. So I mean, to me, it's and I suppose this is the organisational psychologist coming out. When you're operating in fast-moving, complex, challenging environments, and cricket can be one of those. The way you deal with complexity is through what we call mental models. So if you train as a pilot, for example, you'll learn a mental model called aviate, navigate, communicate. It's pretty handy because if you're in the air, the first rule is aviate, which basically means if there isn't a runway underneath you, you better stay in the air.
Keep yourself up there,
not bad advice. The second one is navigate, which says you'd better find somewhere to land. And the third one is communicate. You might want to make sure that somebody's on the ground there when you get there because you might need some guidance and some support and whatever. So aviate, navigate, communicate is one of those. And to me, the sort of what I'm trying to do with cricketers is say, when I'm in the heat of battle, what's my equivalent of aviate, navigate, communicate? So in some ways, a clear mind will help you to be able to own your space and hold your shape. But equally, owning your space and holding your shape will also precipitate a clear mind. So, for example, what I'm trying to do is help when I'm working with a test team, for example, it's when you walk out, I don't know, we saw Constas, for example, when he played for Australia in the tests against India, he's dashing out, jumping up and down, he's out on the pitch, and Khawaja's still just strolling through the gate. And that's fine, because that's their rhythm, and you look at how they own their space and hold their shape, quite different. But it's helping and what we all need to do in these high demand environments is learn what works for us, and then how do I then adapt that for context. So there's a number of strategies you can use for clear mind. I mean, a lot of the mindfulness practices, using breath, training yourself around just attention control, but also just recognizing almost the flip side of it. What is it that takes you away from having a clear mind? What are those distractions? Are you distracted by? I remember when I'm working with the shooters. I mean, from a lot of them, it was like, well, but we can't hold our concentration. We get distracted. Okay, of course you can't hold your concentration. Nobody can hold their concentration for an hour and a half. It just doesn't happen like that. The question is, can you pull your concentration back 60 times? That's what we've now got to practice. So in a sense, what I want to do is get you used to being distracted and disrupted and get you to be able to go back again. And you look at the best tennis players, that's what they are able to do. No matter what happens, they'll be able to play the next point really well, or on the big points they play it well. So to me, clear mind is, in a sense, it's pretty simple. Clarity is knowing what matters. So if you're batting, what matters is the ball, and what it's doing and what the context of the field is and the pitch and so on. If you're bowling, what matters is knowing what you need to do from a rhythm point of view. So all I'm doing is trying to help a player to just get better at understanding and recognising that, in order to, we'll get on to it in a moment, but in order to play brave, you need to have a clear mind. Because if you don't have a clear mind, chances are you're going to be over-aggressive, over-cautious, and you're not going to hold shape. You're not going to make the right choices. But it's a practice. It's over time. Nobody ever perfects it. What Simon Sinek called it, not the just cause, the word, I'll think of it, but it's the thing that you work towards, but you never achieve it. That clear mind, it's never perfectly clear. But you can recognise a lot of things we do in life that get in the way of having a clear mind. So, get used to how to do that.
I absolutely. I think what chimed to me there is knowing what matters, because sometimes when you're talking with players when they are making those judgment decision making, execution, their perception of what mattered at that point might not have been the best or the thing that actually mattered. And I think that's knowing what matters and knowing. And I think another point you mentioned there of not fully being able to clear your mind, because it's there's always something going on in your mind. You're a human, but realizing when when it's clear enough, when it's clear enough to be able to be at your level of this is me, not being influenced. I've got clarity of thought, and these are the important things that that will allow me to make those judgments and decisions.
Yeah, and having the tools then. So how do I reset? I mean, one of the sort of fun exercises we did with one group one day was, and I was just curious to see what happened, and the players didn't mind doing it. So what we had players do was they had to bowl a delivery. We had them sort of set up in sort of groups, and they had to bowl a delivery and then run a certain distance, like 50 metres, run back, go to their mark, bowl again, run back, bowl again, run back, bowl again, to the point where they're absolutely exhausted by the end. And we're measuring their accuracy. And we did it twice, and we intersposed in between it. On the second round, we put somebody at the top of their bowling mark, and we just said to them, pause, you have 3 seconds. In that 3 seconds, tell the person what you're going to deliver. The accuracy increased dramatically, even though they were at their most tired. But just dramatically. So hence we're saying to them, okay, so you don't need to have somebody at the top of your mark. Just say at the top of your mark what you're going to do. And don't say it so that you can be lip-read, but it's stating your intent. So I know it's mind-numbingly obvious, but we don't do those things. We assume the bowler's running in with a plan in mind. I wouldn't bet on it, because I know I didn't. But I look back now and go, oh, God. I look at how the Olympic athletes are approaching this. They're thinking about they're going, what are you going to bowl? I'm going to bowl 10 overs. All right. How many balls? 60 deliveries. Okay. That's like 60 shots. Right. Okay. I want to get a bullseye every shot. Gee, I never thought of it like that. And I think you see that in the test bowlers now, the level of accuracy. There was Pat Cummins, might have been the last Ashes in Australia, I'm not sure. He didn't bowl a ball down the leg side until the second innings of the third test. I mean, that is just incredible. But yes, that's a physical challenge, but that's not physical, that's mental. That's the ability to be able to replicate and know what you're doing and do it unbelievably well. James Anderson, same thing. So they've honed those sorts of things. So I think these are the things that coaches can be thinking about is, how do I build those simple things so that my player has a clear intent when they're running in, or you're watching the batsman, you put them in the nets, you put them in the little scenario for 5 minutes and said, so what does matter in that situation? Does it matter how hard you hit it? Does it matter whether you swing at it? What matters? You go, actually hitting it where the fielders aren't. That's what matters. and also think about how hard you hit it, because maybe you can run 2 rather than, it's hard to hit a 4, but you can run 2 twos. So how do you do that? So I think that, to me, is the psychology that coaches can build in, more so than a lot of the sports psychology books that will go, well, I need to get the players to sort of close their eyes and visualise. Yeah, that'll be helpful. But you want them to have a skill set that they can use when they're physically there. And then you can reinforce that through the visualisation and so on. So then they're visualising how a reset rather than imagining it and then hoping it's going to work. I mean, there's only one rule in sports psychology that pretty much works, and it's the last thing you learn. It's the first thing will fall apart under pressure. So you've got to drill it. You've got to reinforce it. Was it James Clear say in Atomic Habits? We don't rise to the level of our goals. We sink to the level of our systems. Cricket, same thing. Level of your routines.
It really does. Sort of, you see it quite a lot. Let's tie that in, and you've already just mentioned it. So the next bit, the play brave. What is Play Brave. How are we then moving along this model and moving into Play Brave then?
Yeah, I mean, to me, Play Brave is essentially the basic sports psychology premise that we're more likely to be successful if we go towards success rather than to avoid failure. So if you stop to think about that for a moment, that is, okay, in a batting bowling contest, somebody's applying pressure to somebody else. I need to be able to absorb the pressure, whether I'm bowling or batting, and then I want to be able to put that pressure back again. Now, whether I apply that pressure by being strong in my intent around defence, strong in my intent around how I'm hitting, it depends obviously if I'm playing a T20 versus a longer form, but the essence of Play Brave is to go towards what you want rather than away from what you don't want. And every piece of sports psychology research tells us that's the recipe for success. Now, the challenge with cricket is to help the player recognise it doesn't mean that instead of hitting a 2, you hit a 4 or a 6. It's about your intent, and it's about you applying pressure. And when I'm having that conversation with players in the nets, I'm just constantly saying, batsmen and bowlers, who's got pressure on who at the moment? And of course, you need an outcome or a consequence for that. So, okay, what is it you're trying to work on at the moment? The batsman says he's going to let 2 of the next 3 balls go. Okay, well, this will be fun, won't it? You're going to need to bowl on the stumps. Okay, so that's just a little bit of pressure. And then what happens when you're out in the game? So it's just getting used to those sorts of things. So to me, Play Brave is just simply that. Approach success.
How does that differ from, and I hear this in various clubs and players, and they use the sort of term, I'm not afraid to fail. And I think for me, they are, they're similar, but I think they are slightly, different approaches from your sort of academic understanding or experience. How would the two, and obviously you don't use the term failure, in that sort of in the headline model set. How do they differ then in your view?
Well, look, I think maybe I almost jump straight to the coach and the parent. I think that the danger is that we tend to have the sense of I scored runs, I succeeded. I didn't score a run, I failed. I took wickets, I did, etc. So there are so many aspects to your performance. Like, what was your preparation like? Were you ready? Were you Did you own your space? Did you hold your shape and so on? So to me, I'm trying to get the player to focus more on doing that than I am on the outcome. It's a bit like golfer. If you're working with a golfer, you say, give yourself a score out of 10, 5 points for your planning and 5 points for your execution. And if you planned it well and you executed your plan, that's a 10. It doesn't matter whether the ball went along the ground or not. That's a technical issue. The question is, can you plan? Can you execute? And in some respects, that's the same. So I try to focus a whole lot less on the outcome because the fear then comes down to those sort of those natural human fears. I want to appear competent. I want to be approved and liked and respected by other people. That gets you into thinking about outcomes. That's a natural part of sport, that we are going to be thinking about outcomes, but I'm far more interested in getting them to say, how good was my process? Did I own space, hold shape? And sorry, I sound like a broken record, but you watch the good players, that's what they do. And the reason they score runs and take wickets is because they do that consistently under pressure. So they're reliable. So to me, it's the ability to learn. And it's no different in a corporate environment. It's our equivalent of aviate, navigate, communicate in a corporate environment with teams. Just align, collaborate, learn. You look at any high performance environment, they are all anchored around debriefing and learning. They have action debriefs built into every aspect. And I think the same applies from a cricket point of view as well. It's the way to get around fear of failure is replace it with the eagerness to learn.
Yeah, really value that ability to debrief and have the open, honest, debriefs within the group. I think there's a lot to be be valued and had from a team cohesion and perspective as
There
well,
is.
in terms of sort of that team psychological safety and being able to
It
have
is.
that. There's quite a lot that's required from your cultures, your values, your approaches beforehand to get to that space.
Exactly.
But as a coach, that's what I see my role as somebody who's trying to create that environment to allow those things to happen. We then move into play clever. How does that sort of differ from playing brave? What to you is playing clever?
If I put one word in there, it's awareness. It's
Hmm.
just being aware of the game, aware of the game situation, and aware of your position and role in that game. Probably the advantage players have these days over, when I was playing, you
Hmm.
saw a little bit on television. These days, players get so much opportunity through YouTube and through watching games and so on, to hear people commentating about the game and what's going on. So to me, play clever is awareness. It's the example I used a few minutes ago. Like two doubles rather than trying to hit a boundary. Bowling just slightly further outside off stump, just gradually easing your way in towards the stumps, because that's your strategy. So to me, play clever is a bit at a micro level. It's the bowler pausing at the top of the mark and say, "This is what I'm going to do." But I think at the end of the day, it's game awareness, and again, the coach's role: debrief and learn. What did we learn? What would have worked in that situation? Do you fit what was creating pressure, etc. And again, that's why I'm trying in the nets to get the players to think about who's applying pressure to whom and how. So play clever is a game awareness.
And there's so many things that you can do and approaches and conversations you can have during training sessions that
Yeah,
develop a
yeah,
player's awareness, the strategic awareness, or the the sort of the tactical awareness of
yeah,
what am I focusing on, and how am I learning to create my awareness of the situation, of the game, of the context, and being able to
yeah,
train and practice that. You don't have to be indoors, outdoors, in a game, in a training session, to be able to go and do that, because naturally, as humans, we do that in social circles, in situations at work, at
yeah,
home.
yeah.
Sometimes when we put those pads on or hold a ball in the hand, those skills that we have,
Exactly.
innate as a human, don't come to the forefront, because we've put ourselves in a different environment that we think cricket requires something else, when actually we've spent X amount of years developing all those things and putting them into life practice.
I think it's a really. I mean, in the corporate world, you often get I work a lot with leaders, so you get a lot of this sort of, well, what leadership style should I use?
Hmm.
And the example I often use is saying, well, there's probably some leadership styles you don't want, aren't there? And they go, oh yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
You say, well, you probably don't want to be a micromanager, I'm guessing. No, you don't want to be a micromanager. And you go, okay, so let's assume you've got a new staff member and you're putting them into a really dangerous environment and they're not very competent. How would you deal with it? And I go, oh, I'd micromanage. Go, exactly. So how do you know that? Because of the context. Exactly.
Hmm.
So the first thing you need to become aware of more than anything else is become smart and understanding the context. And cricket's the same. Yeah. Like what to do in that situation? I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah.
What's your style? What's the game situation? How do I make those choices? And that's why we get better and better over time. But I think that's the beauty of cricket. And that's what, I mean, I love the T20 games, because I just think that is just an accelerated example of
Hmm.
strategy. You can look and see that it's all helter-skelter, but have a conversation with somebody, like Greg Shippard's been one of the sort of top coaches in Australia, and taken their team to the Big Bash Championship on a number of occasions. Have a chat to Greg about the strategies that are going on and the way the players are developed, and so it's fabulous. And I think that ability to become aware of the game and aware of yourself in that game, that's what we're endeavouring to do. Hence the clear mind, play brave, play clever, and then play better. We probably talked about it, I think, already around that sort of how do you learn? And again, that's a mental model. It's a simple way of thinking about am I approaching the game with a clear mind rather than being distracted? Am I going towards success rather than away from it? Am I being aware? Am I adapting to context? And then I need to learn. I need to be able to reflect and get better.
Would you say it was fair then that, and I'm sure there are many other reasons, but picking up what you just said there, a successful team or individual or organization is one that can learn, and the rate at which they learn is is sort of a factor for success.
Yeah, one of the defence teams I work with here in Australia, they have this lovely expression, we have to be able to learn at the speed of relevance. And that's fabulous. That, you stop and think about it, wow, okay. That's the ability to absorb what's going on around you, to absorb the changes in technology, the politics and everything that's going on around you, and learn fast enough so you can deliver value. And that's cricket, isn't it? Mm-hmm. I need to learn at the speed of relevance. Yeah, well, they just bowled 2 outswingers and you've just played and missed, and I reckon they're going to pitch the next one up, and I think you're going to nick it. Unless you have learned at the speed of relevance, which is hold your shape. Like get back a little, or get forward. Like, what are you going to do differently? Learning at the speed of relevance.
And that to me is the beauty of cricket with all the formats that we have. You are, and the sub sort of speeds within those formats. When you're picking the rhythm and the approach of the over or the innings, it's being able to be aware of that. But I absolutely love that learning at the speed of relevance, because sometimes it might require very quick, and then sometimes it might not be in that space. Dr. Graham, I have already sort of taken up a whole load of your time this evening, chatting and discussing some of those questions. It's gone by in an absolute flash. I could have probably asked a whole load more questions, but thank you very much for coming on and sharing those ideas. If viewers are interested to understand a little bit more about yourself and a little bit more about Mindful Cricket, how can they go about that?
Mindful Cricket has a website, so mindfulcricket.com. I haven't added anything new to that for a little while, but I am working on a project at the moment, which I won't go into the specifics of it.
No, keep us hanging. Yeah, we look forward to it.
I can say it's specifically designed for young cricketers.
Amazing.
I think based on the response that I got from Mindful Cricket, I think there's a real need and opportunity to provide something for the young cricketers, so maybe in the 11, 12 through to 16, 18. So I'm working on a little project at the moment that hopefully might come to fruition some stage during the year, but it's a few months off yet, but hopefully not. Hopefully it will be out before the end of the year. Yeah. So, there's a teaser, but I'm not going to commit myself to it yet. I did a big corporate book last year that with one of the vice chancellors, one of the universities in Australia. It's gone really well, and we redid Think One Team, which is my sort of main business book, but it's just come out with its 3rd edition. So it's time to do something in the cricket area. So I'm having a bit of fun putting together a bit of stuff for young cricketers at the moment. So we'll love to keep in touch on that.
That'd be great, and it sounds really good that you can dive into various worlds and interests to keep that passion and enthusiasm going, rather than sort of going down one path. But Dr. Graham, thank you very much for your time, your enthusiasm, your openness, your reflective views, opinions to share with the listeners. It's been really enjoyable to have you on. Thank you.
No, thank you for the invitation. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, then please like, follow and share this podcast with others. And don't forget, if you would like to feature as a coach, or you would like us to cover something, then please email us at thecricketcoachingcode@gmail.com. That's it for this week. Until next time, go well.